What if I told you there's one rule, just one, that has the power to transform your entire life, to turn chaos into order and suffering into meaning? Responsibility is the very foundation of meaning in life, and without it, people quickly find themselves lost in a void of aimlessness and despair. Happiness, as attractive as it sounds, is not solid ground to build upon because it is fleeting, unpredictable, and dependent on circumstances often beyond our control. It rises and falls with external events, shifting like the weather, and anyone who attempts to make it their ultimate pursuit will eventually discover that it slips through their fingers the moment life turns difficult. Meaning, however, is built upon something much deeper, and that depth comes from responsibility. When you take responsibility for your life, you align yourself with something more enduring than pleasure, something that provides stability even when the storms of suffering strike. Responsibility is not imposed on you as a punishment, but as a framework, as the structure that transforms chaos into order, as the very thing that grants weight and direction to existence. Think about the moments in your own life that felt the most significant, the ones that seemed to matter deeply. They were not the moments of indulgence or temporary happiness. They were the moments where you took something seriously, where you cared for someone, where you stepped into a role that required sacrifice and effort. Perhaps it was caring for a parent who was ill, or perhaps it was dedicating yourself to a craft that demanded years of discipline. Those moments carried weight because they were steeped in responsibility, and it was precisely that responsibility that produced meaning. It is easy to retreat into comfort, into distraction, into an existence where nothing truly depends on you. But that very retreat is what breeds emptiness. Without responsibility, there is no direction, and without direction, despair takes root. What responsibility does is it anchors you. It demands something of you, and that demand is what prevents you from being tossed around aimlessly by the currents of life. It is no accident that when people avoid responsibility, they become more anxious, more resentful, and more nihilistic. They drift without aim, searching for happiness, and instead they find only suffering compounded by the absence of meaning. On the other hand, when people take up responsibility voluntarily, something profound happens. The suffering does not vanish, but it becomes bearable because it is placed within the context of something meaningful. A parent may sacrifice sleep, comfort, and personal freedom for a child, but those sacrifices are not empty, they are filled with purpose. That is why people who shoulder heavy responsibility often radiate strength. They are supported by the very thing they are carrying. Responsibility provides a pathway through the chaos of existence, a way to bring order to what would otherwise be overwhelming. When you decide to act responsibly, you are not just making life harder for yourself, though it will become harder. You are actually constructing a foundation on which your life can stand. And it is precisely because that foundation is solid that you can withstand the inevitable suffering that comes your way. Without responsibility, suffering is pointless. With responsibility, suffering is transformed into a story that matters. Responsibility is not a burden to flee from, it is the source of meaning itself, the bedrock upon which you can build a life that is worth the struggle. To act as if your choices matter is to recognize the immense weight of every decision, no matter how small it seems in the moment. Most people move through life imagining that their actions are insignificant, that what they say or do makes little difference in the grand scheme of things. But this belief is both false and destructive. Every action creates ripples, extending far beyond the immediate situation. The words you speak to another person can lift them up or crush them. The habits you build today determine the kind of future you will inhabit. Even the way you carry yourself, whether with integrity or carelessness, sets a tone that influences others around you, often in ways you cannot fully perceive. To act as if your choices matter is to live with the awareness that your life is not isolated. It is connected to countless others, and the quality of your existence directly affects theirs. Imagine for a moment that you choose to tell a small lie. You might think it harmless, insignificant. Yet that lie plants a seed of distortion in your reality. Perhaps it erodes a little trust with someone close to you. Perhaps it leads you into another lie to cover the first. Over time, those small distortions accumulate, and before long, you find yourself living in a tangled web of deceit that not only corrupts your relationships but undermines your own sense of self. On the other hand, imagine that you choose to tell the truth even when it costs you. That truth may sting in the short term, but it creates a foundation of trust, clarity, and strength that will serve you and those around you in ways you cannot calculate. This is the essence of acting as though your choices matter. It is easy to dismiss responsibility by telling yourself you are too small to influence the world, but that is an abdication of the profound role each individual plays in shaping reality. The world is not changed by massive gestures alone. It is shaped by millions of small acts of courage, honesty, and discipline performed by ordinary people. When you treat every decision as significant, you begin to live with intention rather than drifting in unconscious habits. You clean your room, you fulfill your obligations, you speak carefully, and each of those actions reinforces order over chaos. That order does not stop at the boundaries of your life. It radiates outward into your family, your workplace, your community. When people choose to act carelessly, they hand over their power to chaos. They diminish themselves, they weaken the bonds of trust in their relationships, and they add to the disorder of the world. But when they act deliberately, as if what they do matters, they reclaim their role as creators of meaning. This mindset transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. A simple decision, choosing kindness instead of cruelty, diligence instead of laziness, truth instead of lies, can redirect the trajectory of a life. To act as if your choices matter is to recognize that the future is built, piece by piece, from the decisions made in the present, and that every single one of them counts. Lies have a way of corrupting not only the person who speaks them, but also the reality in which they exist. When you tell a lie, even a small one, you introduce a fracture into the structure of truth that sustains order. That fracture might appear invisible at first, but over time it spreads like cracks in a foundation, weakening the stability of everything built upon it. A lie distorts perception, and since people act in the world based on their perception of it, once that perception is corrupted, their actions lead to unintended consequences. You may tell a lie to avoid responsibility, but the avoidance only postpones and multiplies the very problems you sought to escape. The lie grows roots, it demands protection, and soon enough you are no longer in control of it. It is in control of you. Truth, on the other hand, is the force that brings order out of chaos. When you choose to tell the truth, you align yourself with reality. And reality is the ultimate ground upon which meaning is built. To tell the truth is difficult because it often requires sacrifice. It may cost you comfort, reputation, or even relationships. But the alternative is worse. A life built on lies is a life built on sand, and eventually the entire structure collapses under the weight of its own falseness. People who live dishonestly begin to lose trust not only from others but also from themselves. They can no longer rely on their own words, their own memory, their own conscience, because everything is clouded with deception. That erosion of self-trust is devastating, leaving people disoriented and hollow. The truth has a remarkable quality. It cleanses. It strips away illusions and forces you to confront what actually is, not what you wish it to be. That confrontation can be painful, but it is also liberating, because it allows you to operate in the real world rather than a distorted fantasy. If you want to orient yourself properly in life, you need to know where you stand, and the only way to discover that is through honesty. Even when the truth is brutal, it provides solid ground. A terrible truth is infinitely better than a comforting lie, because at least with the truth, you can face reality as it is and act accordingly. The act of speaking truth is not just about accuracy, it is a moral act. It acknowledges that your words shape reality, not only for you, but for those around you. When you lie, you manipulate reality for personal gain, often at the expense of others, and in doing so, you participate in the spread of chaos. When you tell the truth, you shoulder the weight of reality voluntarily, and that willingness strengthens your character. Truth-telling builds trust, and trust is the invisible glue that holds families, friendships, communities, and even nations together. Without trust, everything falls apart. That is why the choice between lying and telling the truth is not small or insignificant. It is the choice between corruption and order, between chaos and meaning, between a life built on deceit and a life built on something solid and enduring. Suffering is unavoidable in life, and no amount of wealth, comfort, or distraction can erase it. What makes the difference is not whether you suffer, but how you relate to that suffering. To run from it, to avoid it at all costs, only makes it more unbearable because you turn yourself into a victim of circumstances. But to embrace suffering voluntarily, to step forward and carry it willingly, transforms it into something entirely different. This is where responsibility merges with courage. By choosing to face suffering head on, you assign it meaning, and it ceases to be pointless pain. It becomes the price you pay for growth, for love, for purpose. Voluntary suffering is not masochism. It is the recognition that the weight you carry is the very thing that shapes you into someone capable of living a meaningful life. Consider what happens when a person avoids suffering. They retreat into comfort, numbing themselves with entertainment, distractions, and excuses. On the surface, this may look like an easier life, but underneath it grows weakness and resentment. The challenges never disappear, they simply accumulate in the shadows, waiting to overwhelm. Avoided suffering festers and multiplies, becoming a source of bitterness that poisons everything. In contrast, when someone steps into suffering willingly, they turn the tables. Instead of being crushed by it, they grow stronger under its weight. The suffering does not diminish, but the person expands. They discover capacities within themselves they would never have known otherwise. Take the example of someone caring for a sick loved one. The responsibility is heavy, the pain constant, and the exhaustion unrelenting. It would be far easier to look away, to delegate, or to abandon. Yet those who choose to bear that suffering discover something profound. The act of carrying that burden deepens love, strengthens character, and forges bonds that cannot be created in ease. The suffering becomes infused with purpose. It transforms from senseless agony into meaningful sacrifice. This is the alchemy of voluntary suffering. It turns pain into value, weakness into strength, despair into growth. Life continually presents opportunities to embrace this principle. You can avoid the discipline of study and work, or you can suffer through it and build competence. You can avoid difficult conversations, or you can endure the discomfort and strengthen relationships. You can avoid responsibility for your health, or you can suffer through the discipline of exercise and nourishment. In every case, choosing to carry the weight now spares you from a far heavier burden later. Voluntary suffering is the path of transformation because it forces you to confront what you fear and endure what is difficult. And in doing so, you become someone capable of far more than you imagined. The paradox is that by choosing to suffer willingly, you reduce unnecessary suffering. Chaos shrinks when faced with courage, while it grows when ignored. Life is structured in such a way that those who carry the heaviest loads find themselves standing on the firmest ground. The willingness to suffer voluntarily is not only what gives meaning to existence, but also what makes resilience and greatness possible. Courage in the face of chaos is not merely about boldness in moments of crisis. It is the continual decision to confront the unknown rather than retreat into the false safety of avoidance. Chaos is ever present, lurking in the unpredictability of life, in the uncertainty of the future, in the breakdown of relationships, in sickness, and in loss. It is easy to cower before it, to pretend it is not there, or to numb yourself against its presence. But doing so only magnifies its power. Chaos grows when left unattended, and those who refuse to confront it become smaller and weaker as it expands around them. Courage is the choice to step into that chaos willingly, to face it with open eyes, even though fear still lingers. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the act of moving forward despite fear. When you choose responsibility in the midst of chaos, you refuse to be defined by the circumstances outside your control. You discover that you can bring order into a situation that appears entirely fragmented. Consider the person who loses their job unexpectedly. Chaos descends instantly. Uncertainty about finances, about the future, about one's own worth. Some collapse under that weight, surrendering to despair. Others, however, confront the situation directly, reorganizing their lives, seeking new opportunities, learning new skills. Their courage in confronting the chaos does not erase the suffering, but it allows them to carve a path through it. It is in this confrontation that human potential is revealed, because only by meeting chaos do you discover what strengths lie dormant within you. Courage also demands truth. You cannot bring order to chaos if you are unwilling to face reality as it is. To hide from the truth, to shield yourself with lies or excuses, is to surrender to disorder. Courage is the resolve to say, "This is how things truly are, no matter how painful," and then to take action from that position of honesty. This is why courageous people are often admired. They embody the willingness to confront what others avoid, and in doing so, they provide an example of strength for those around them. Courage is contagious, just as cowardice is contagious. One person who stands firm in the midst of chaos can inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of resilience and order. It is important to recognize that chaos is not always the enemy. Chaos is also possibility. It contains within it the seeds of transformation and new beginnings. But those seeds can only be cultivated through courage. If you run from chaos, you run from growth itself. Every meaningful achievement requires passing through a period of uncertainty and disorder, and only those willing to face it emerge stronger. The student who confronts the chaos of ignorance learns. The entrepreneur who braves the chaos of risk builds something new. The individual who faces the chaos of their own flaws grows in character. Courage does not eliminate chaos, but it turns chaos into an arena for growth. It reveals who you might become if you refuse to flee. if you choose to step forward into the storm rather than hide from it. Transformation through responsibility is one of the most profound realities of human life. People often underestimate just how much their lives can change when they stop blaming circumstances, stop resenting others, and instead take ownership of what they can control. Responsibility is not simply about doing chores, paying bills, or meeting obligations, though those things matter. It is about recognizing that your actions and attitudes shape your existence, and that the life you live tomorrow is directly tied to the choices you make today. When you begin to carry responsibility, you initiate a transformation that extends far beyond the surface. You become someone stronger, more reliable, more capable, and others begin to see you as a source of stability in a world where instability is the default. Think of someone who has drifted for years, blaming fate, blaming family, or blaming society for their condition. Such a person remains trapped, because as long as the responsibility for their life lies outside themselves, they remain powerless to change it. Now imagine that same person deciding, even in a small way, to take charge of something within their reach, keeping order in their living space, pursuing discipline in their health, or telling the truth rather than hiding behind excuses. That first act of responsibility creates a small spark of change. Over time, the accumulation of such acts reshapes not only the person's habits, but their very identity. They begin to view themselves differently, not as a victim tossed about by forces beyond their control, but as an agent capable of bringing order and meaning into their own existence. Responsibility has the power to heal relationships as well. When someone accepts responsibility for their words and actions rather than projecting blame, trust begins to grow. Families mend when one person decides to own their faults rather than conceal them. Communities strengthen when individuals step forward to carry burdens that others ignore. Nations thrive when citizens act responsibly, contributing to order rather than chaos. Transformation is never isolated. It ripples outward, affecting everyone connected to the person who chose to bear responsibility. The act of taking ownership becomes a force of renewal, pulling others upward along with the individual who initiated it. It is also through responsibility that potential is revealed. Many people underestimate what they are capable of, not because they lack ability, but because they avoid the weight that would bring that ability forth. Muscles grow when they are placed under resistance, and the human spirit develops in the same way. By choosing to carry heavier loads, whether in work, in relationships, or in service, you force yourself into growth. The person you are today is not the limit of who you can be. The path to your stronger self lies in the responsibilities you are willing to shoulder. The remarkable thing is that as you transform, the world itself begins to transform with you. A single responsible person can alter the atmosphere of an entire household, workplace, or community, proving that responsibility is not just a private virtue, but a force that reshapes reality. So, the rule that changes everything is simple yet profound. Take responsibility, tell the truth, act as though what you do matters, and step willingly into the weight of life. Because it is through that burden that you discover strength, meaning, and the power to transform both yourself and the world around you.